It may finally be time to move away from new old stock tubes. There's a relatively new kid in town who is making tubes that have changed my enjoyment of vinyl records. And it's these. And this video has been a long time coming. Recently I've been experimenting with tube rolling, and I've been rolling new old stock and new production tubes in both of my amps, specifically my Eric Audio Transcend amp, which is in my main listening room, an amp I thoroughly love. When I received my Transcend amp from Eric Audio, I played around with a lot of different tube combinations. For quite a while, I thought that the sweet spot for me was a mix of Mullard new production EL34s on the output stage and Tungsol new production on the input stage, and that was with the 6SN7s. That combination brought I would say, a rich and silky mid-range to the presentation, and it also rolled off the highs in a way that I really appreciated. I hate brightness in a system, and whenever my setup starts to lean towards brightness, I scramble for ways to tame it. So that usually involves with changing the tube combinations. And I thought that I was all set. And then I had a conversation with Nelson at Ray Tubes. Ray Tubes, I bet you've never heard of them. Or maybe you have. And like I said, they're a relatively new kid in town. Now, if you're into tubes, you know that there's relatively few places that manufacture tubes today. Those being Russia and Asia, mainly China, and also Slovakia. There are exceptions, like Western Electric and Takatsuki. What I learned in speaking with Nelson is that Ray Tubes works with a number of manufacturers, both in Europe and in Asia. And the thing to remember is, when tubes are made, or when a factory produces tubes, doesn't matter where it is, they're producing tubes for a number of applications. It's not all audio. So take, like, say, 12AX7 tubes or 12AU7 tubes. They might be being produced for the military sector or the medical sector for things like, X-ray machines and such. So they're not all for audio, but it's the same production line that produces them. So when they're shipping off tubes, they're really generalized. What Ray Tubes does is they take those tubes that are coming off the production line and put them through their own quality control process. They're hand selecting tubes for audio. They're looking for those that meet their standards for gain, dynamics, performance, and things like microphonics. All they care about is if the tube is audio quality. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other evaluations before selling them under their own brand. Another thing that you get is quality consistency. If you buy a pair of Ray Tubes today and then you buy another pair 6 months from now, you're going to get the same experience. To be honest, and I'm not going to call out any brands here, but if I bought, say, 3 tubes from a particular brand, there's a very good chance that each of those tubes are going to sound slightly different. That's just the way it is today with new production tubes. Now, one thing I will say about Ray Tubes is they are very proud of their product. I wish all companies shipped their tubes like this. Right out of the gate, they make you feel as if you're receiving something a little bit special. Marketing is a thing, but really all that matters is the sound. So when I received the tubes, I really wanted to try them out in my main amp, that being the Transcend amp from Eric Audio. And it takes 3 6SN7 tubes and 4 EL34s. For that, I went with the Reserve series from Ray Tubes, which is supposed to be their best of the best. It's a step above their Select series and a couple steps above their Core series. Their Reserve tubes, at least the ones that I have here, have an inside coating that they call their magic coating. I know, marketing. But still, it's a thing. It reminds me of those old, not really old, but those black treasure from Shiguang. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but they call them the Shiggy Black Treasures. They did something similar. And this carbon-based coating is a high polymer carbon compound, say that 3 times fast, which is supposed to reduce interference, help with electron flow, and also help with microphonics. Now, I said at the beginning of this video that these tubes have stopped my obsession over NOS tubes, or new old stock tubes. And they've also changed the way I listen to my records, or at least changed, again, my experience of listening to my records. In what way? Well, I really just want to listen to them all again. Why? Well, maybe it's system synergy, or maybe it's the tonal range and the macro dynamics that these tubes bring to the table. But I will say I have not experienced holographic sounds like I do with these tubes in place, both the EL34s and the 6SN7s. I've tried different tube combinations. I have achieved holographic sound before, but this is wider, it's more three-dimensional, which again speaks to the holographic sound, but that's the best way to put it, is the instruments are completely separated across the soundstage where you turn your head and you can separate and identify where each of the instruments are in that soundstage. Wasn't the same with the Mullard and the tongue saw in place. Or the Pavane, I should say. It was almost there, but with the Ray tubes in place, it's there. Even an album like Foghat's Fool for the City, which is not an album known for its wide soundstage, that was presented. It was brought to life in front of me. And that's what I mean by wanting to hear all of my records again. It was like I was listening to a new remastered and remixed record, not a record that's been in my possession for 50 years or almost 50 years. Well, 40 anyways, but it is a 50-year-old record. You wouldn't expect that. So it did make me wonder, what would Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon sound like with the system the way it is now? But can it really be the tubes? Well, yes, it can. I will say, with the Mullards and the tongue saws and the Pavanes, all sounded great. But after spending time with the Ray tubes, it was a whole new level of sound, or a whole new experience that I hadn't achieved before. It does make you wonder, what else can the system do? But the Ray tubes really bring something, like I said, bring something to the table. Now, I will say the change wasn't immediate. Once I received the tubes, I would say I sat with them for about 10 hours, not 10 hours straight, but 10 hours before that sound stage or that holographic sound began to bloom. And it was probably another 20 hours before it was set in stone. Now, I do understand in talking with Nelson that Ray Tubes they also do their own burn-in period before sending those tubes out, at least with that Reserve series. They might do it with the other series, but I definitely know they do it with the Reserve series. So a little bit of burn-in time on my end helped improve everything. I noticed too that during the burn-in period that it was about 45 minutes into playing time that the 3D sound began to emerge. And it was probably another hour after that you'd really begin to hear that holographic sound. After the 30 hours, it was very little time after dropping the needle that the sound stage and the holographic sound began to move outward and into the listening space. Another thing I really like about these is how tube-like they sound. Weird thing to say about tubes, I know, but tubes can, depending on the brand and depending on the tube, can sound very clinical. The tongue saw KT150s I have, they're dynamic, but they're very clinical sounding. Now, I have the Ray tubes running in ultra-linear mode, with the feedback knob set at around 90%. The highs are there, but never harsh. They're smooth, and that low end is forever there. The EL34s bring their mid-range magic to the mix for a very convincing stage. I do want to point out something else about the tubes that have nothing to do with the sound, it's their shape. Now, a lot of the traditional EL34s and 6SN7s, here's the EL34 Mullards and the tongue saw 6SN7s, you'll see that they have a very cylindrical shape. Now, with the Ray tubes, we'll pull out this is the EL34s. They have that Coke bottle shape to them, which is different than the cylindrical shape you most often see with EL34s. It's also the same thing with their 6SN7s. Again, you see that Coke bottle shape. Now, this Coke bottle or shoulder tube shape, I have seen this with other 6SN7s, but usually not so much with EL34s. I think Pavane has done this in the past, and I only bring this up because it depends on your amp. If you have an amp where the tubes are very close together, you do want to keep it in mind if you're looking at these Ray tubes because of their wider profile. So there you have it, Ray tubes. Now I'm going to put Nelson's contact information in the description. He's very approachable. I got his permission to do this. He loves talking to tube enthusiasts. And one thing about this hobby and about this journey is you're always learning something new, and there's always something new on the horizon. And I'm looking forward to 2025 just to see, what new things come out, because prior to this past year, I didn't know anything about Ray tubes. And like I said, they've transformed how I listen to my music now. So if you found any of this information helpful, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And there's also a newsletter too. It's free to join. I'll put links to that in the description as well. So until next time, please take care of yourself, enjoy your records, and I will see you soon.